You definitely want to watch this before you consider buying an electric vehicle. Here's a really good narrative from an editor of Kelley Blue Book, one of the main automotive publications, about one of their editors who took a long trip in an electric vehicle and what the consequences of that were. Also, even the Toyota chief scientist says the world is not ready for EVs, and we'll talk about why they believe that. And this matches a lot of stuff we've talked about in videos in the past. But first, this editor took an electric vehicle for a road trip, which is what people love to do in their cars, take road trips. And it talks about what the EV owner might encounter on a road trip. And this was a weekend trip. It was long distance. It went on a big circle throughout the southeast. And they looked at 5 different problems. Here's their route. Looks like they were in North Carolina. They went through South Carolina, Georgia, Western North Carolina. They might have went into Tennessee and then back. It was a weekend trip. Lesson number 1, make a charging plan and an alternate plan, because charging stations are not as ubiquitous as gas stations are. So if you have a pure plug-in electric vehicle with a range of, let's say, 200 miles, well, every 200 miles, you have to stop to recharge. And there's 2 other hidden dangers of that. First is, whatever range the vehicle is supposed to have, it may not have that range. We did an investigation video last week where the average range is about 20 or 30% less real world than what is promoted by the company. Number 2 is that charging experience, that charging event is not going to be like popping into a gas station and topping off your tank. It might take an hour or 2 or 4 to get range added to your vehicle. So if you have to stop 5 times and it's 3 hours apiece, that's like an extra day on your trip. Also, if you want to go on back roads, you may not find charging stations. Look, this editor said, I prefer lesser traveled scenic byways, but the EV road trip stuck to interstate highways because all you're going to find is electric vehicle charging stations on interstates. And if you find one in a rural area, it might be a low charging speed facility, meaning that it might take many, many hours to charge up, where the high speed chargers are going to be fast charging on the interstates. Number 2, here's what we talked about. Don't rely on the range estimates. I made a rookie mistake by assuming the accuracy of range estimates, and mileage did vary. A lot of times, if you plan on getting to the next charging station and your EV meter starting to go down to 0, you might have to make an alternate arrangement and hope there's going to be a charging station nearby. Number 3, if you are an electric vehicle owner, you likely have a subscription to a charging network. Maybe you pay a monthly fee, maybe you pay an app fee, but you may not be able to find locations for your network everywhere you're going to drive. So prepare to use different networks, and that might cost you more money. If you're a Tesla owner, you might use other networks besides the Tesla supercharger network. Number 4, make the most of charging delays. I think this is kind of like making lemons out of lemonade. Look, nobody wants delays. If you're on a road trip, you want to enjoy your trip. You don't want to be having to find stuff to do in some remote area. And they're talking about, paying $6 to go into a park or go to south of the border or, go to different places. But, if you want to make a schedule for your vacation, you want it to be your schedule and go to places you want to go. You don't want to have to be forced to find tourist attractions or tourist traps in some little rinky-dink town because you have to stop there to recharge for 4 or 5 hours. So look at the stats. This road trip was 1,000 miles. It was 26 hours of actual driving. Okay, that's fine. But there were 13 hours of charging time. Think about that. 50% of the time was spent charging of the driving time. That's a pretty significant thing. That 13 hours was time not used either for traveling to another place or to be at a destination you wanted to be at. These are the numbers that you can count on when planning for current electric vehicle capabilities. So what is the experts think that. Well, here's the chief scientist for Toyota says the world is not ready for electric vehicles. This person does not think EV should be rushed. And part of the reason why is because of the practicality of the use. They also believe that vehicles won't begin and end with EVs, suggesting that there may be something else in the works other than electric vehicles. And this guy's no dummy. He's a chief scientist, executive fellow for research at Toyota, the robotics and computing head for the U.S. Defense Advanced Project Agency. He knows what he's talking about. It says lithium-ion vehicles are not without consequence. They're made from rare mined vehicles, and his own experience feeds into that. He owns a Tesla. His wife owns a Tesla, right? And even though he's a Toyota engineer, they own a Tesla. And he was friends with the engineer of that car. It's an incredible car, he says. But my wife used it commute 30 miles a day. That's what electric vehicles can be used for, which meant 90% of the battery wasn't being used most of the time, just dragging all this raw materials around. Limited battery supply is an issue for electric vehicles. The bottom line, he says, the whole world won't arrive at the same time. Electric vehicles aren't the right answer for the whole world right now. They are for certain parts of the world, not for everybody. Meaning that the charging infrastructure isn't ready. Well, this validates what the road trip guy had to say. And he's not the only executive. The CEO of Ford said that the charging infrastructure isn't up to scratch. And this comes when EVs are a small percentage of cars on the road. What happens when EVs become more of a popular item? Think about it. Electric vehicles are maybe 2 or 3% of the cars on the road. Very small percentage. Even if they go to 6 or 7%, you might think, well, it's still a small percentage. However, going from 3% to 6% is doubling of electric vehicles. If you have twice as many electric vehicles on the road and the same amount of infrastructure and electrical capacity, is that going to be a problem? Or you can have to wait at charging stations just to plug in. Look, electric vehicles are interesting in many ways. They have excellent performance, a lot of torque. They're fun to drive. But the way that Americans use vehicles right now for long road trips and quick gas stops don't match the applicability of electric vehicles. So people either can have to adapt, or the cars will change, or the entire automotive industry will have to adjust itself and evolve. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it remains to be seen. But these are the current realities. Let us know what you think in the comments about electric vehicles and how they might apply to your lifestyle.